How about
Welcome everybody on this Monday afternoon to our Crocheting in the Round class. Darrin is your teacher there on screen. My name is Claire. I'm going to be hanging out in the chat with you, answering any questions you have there or forwarding them on to Darrin as needed. I'll also go ahead and drop the pattern for this little amigurumi into the chat there. We're probably not going to follow it strictly during the course of this class, but then you've got it to refer to later, so you can make this if you wish. And just a reminder for questions, if you do have them, pop them in the chat there and I'll pass them on to Darrin. All righty, let's get started.
All right, welcome to class, everybody. So as Claire said, we're going to learn everything we need to learn to make this octopus amigurumi that we have the pattern for here. But other than that, I'm also going to go over a lot of other information that is going to be helpful mainly for learning how to crochet in the round. So one of the things that makes crochet kind of complicated or confusing, or else it did for me when I was learning, is that there's so many different ways to do so many different things. So you think you're just going to learn to crochet in the round and that's it. But there are so many different ways of accomplishing the same thing that some people say this way is right or that way is right, and their way is better than other ways. And all the ways are good, and depending on what you want and maybe the situation you're in. So we're going to go over some different ways of doing each one of the techniques that we're going to cover. And in the end, if you choose to make this, these are really cute. These, I feel like they are jellyfish. So what do you think, Claire? Do you feel like it's a jellyfish or an octopus?
I agree that it's a jellyfish.
I'm feeling more of a jellyfish, but you can make it and you can call it whatever you want. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump in, and we change the view to the view of my hands, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the pattern is a free pattern from lionbrand.com, and the original yarn used is A Star is Born Naptime. But I am going to be using Pound of Love, which I did not bring in the room with me to show you, but the Pound of Love is a very, very large ball of yarn. It is a pound of yarn, so it is extremely, extremely generous put up. And it is available in many, many colors, and it is on lionbrand.com and michaels.com as well. And it's a worsted weight yarn, it's acrylic, great for baby blankets. It's great for all kinds of projects, and it comes in many, many colors. And the yarn I'm going to be using today in class for demonstrating, however, is I like to demonstrate with this yarn because it shows up so nicely on camera. This is called Hometown Bonus Bundle. And this is also available on lionbrand.com or michaels.com. And it comes in many colors. Again, great yarn for all different types of projects. But this is my favorite yarn to demonstrate with. So I'm going to be demonstrating with this one today. This one is a number 6 yarn, and it calls for a 9mm crochet hook. The amigurumi projects, though, whenever you're making an amigurumi, you want to use a crochet hook that's a little smaller than the yarn is originally calling for. So if you're following the pattern exactly as it's written, then the designer from that pattern will have made that decision for you. But if you decide to change the yarn and use a different yarn like I'm doing, you want to look at whatever your yarn is calling for and then use a hook that's 1 or 2 sizes smaller. So for an amigurumi project, you want the holes in your crochet to be tighter so that they close up a little bit, and you don't want to see the stuffing through the project. Also, if it's tighter and the fabric is a little stiffer, it does hold the shape of your project a little nicer for a toy or something like that. Any questions about yarn choices, hook choices, or anything about the pattern before we get started? Doing all right? So I want to just cover a few quick little tips. When you're crocheting, when you start with your slip knot, it's very nice if especially when you're crocheting in the round, if the tail, if by pulling the tail, that's what manages the size of your slip knot. So that's going to make things a little nicer for you. So for tying a slip knot, the way I like to do it, lay it out like this in a little circle. Put your tail over top your working yarn, so it's the short over long. You reach underneath, grab the tail, hold the tail and the working yarn together and loop it back through. And then what you end up with is if you pull the tail, that's what controls the size of the loop. And I'll show that one more time, just so we can kind of get that out of the way. So make a circle, and however you tie a slip knot is probably fine. This is just my little trick of, this is going to help out later with magic circle as well. So put the tail over top of your working yarn, reach underneath, grab hold of the tail, and then hold the working yarn and the tail together, and then just loop it back through. And just check and see if the tail is what's controlling the size of your loop. And that'll make things just a little better for you in the long run. If you don't do it that way, you'll still be fine. So we're not gonna have any extra anxiety, but I'm just showing you that because it does work out a little nicer. So for crocheting in the round, the way this pattern is having us start is it wants us to chain 2 and then work 8 half double crochets in the second chain from the hook. So we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and then a half double crochet, you yarn over, and then the second chain from the hook, we don't count the one on the hook, the loop on the hook, we're not going to count. So 1, 2, the second chain from the hook, enter, bring up a loop, bring it through all. So we're going to do 8 half double crochet in the second chain from the hook. And this is going to create a circle. Instead of usually when you crochet, maybe before you've crocheted a chain where you've crocheted like maybe 20 or 100 stitches and you worked into that chain, which makes a line. This, by doing all of them in the same chain, is going to create a circle, and that is going to help facilitate us crocheting in the round. All right. So I did all of my, I didn't even count. I was just talking, so I didn't bother to count, but we're going to rip this out and do it a couple of times. But as you can see, it's already starting to make a circle. So it's in the round. So we're already like looking at things that are in the round. And it wants us to place a marker, and it's very helpful, especially in crochet in the round, to place a marker. So I'm going to place a marker at my beginning so I know where the beginning was. Well, it wants us to mark the end. So let's mark the end. So we're going to put the crochet in the end so we know where our end of the round is. So sometimes I like to mark the beginning, but you can mark the end, whichever kind of is going to make the best sense for you. Now for round 2, we're going to work 2 half double crochets in each stitch around. So there are 2 different things you can do at this point. You can work in continuous spirals, which is how the pattern is instructing us to do, or we can work in what's called joined rounds. And I'm going to demonstrate both of those today for you. So you'll have 2 different ways of doing it. So I finished my circle. I'm going to yarn over, and then on my next half double crochet, I'm going to work 2 half double crochet, and that's what's going to cause my circle to increase. And so nothing special happened there. I just finished my round, and then I went to my first one. Let me do that again just so you can see that there's really nothing to see. So I finished my circle, yarn over, and then I'm going to go back into my first half double and do 2 half double. And then I'm going to continue doing 2 half double in each half double. And what that's going to do is double the number of stitches that I have. So if I have 8 stitches, at the end of this round 2, I would have 16. Okay. And I don't know if you've done increases before, but all you have to do this increase is That's my next stitch. I'm going to do a stitch, and then I'm just going to do another stitch in the same one. And in different patterns, they might have you do 3 or 4 stitches in the same one. So, but we're just doing 2 stitches in the same stitch. We're taking 1 stitch and we're turning it into 2 stitches. Any questions about that? So crocheting in the round, once you get started, it's really quite easy. I prefer it than to crocheting straight. I really do quite like it. So 2 stitches in each stitch. And there is my last stitch, which I had marked. Do 2 stitches in the last one. And I'm finished with round 2. So I'm going to put my stitch marker there to mark the last stitch I did. And now I'm ready to move on to round 3. And round 3, we're going to do 2 stitches in the first stitch. And you can see I didn't do anything. I just started round 3 by doing 2 stitches in the first stitch. Nothing special happened. So there's nothing fancy or not really nothing to learn right there. And then I'm going to do 1 stitch and then do 2 stitches in the next one. And that would be round 3, going all the way around. I'm not going to finish it because we want to look at some other things, but I'm going to stop right here for a second and see if anyone has any questions about the slip knot, about working into that second. I chained 2, I worked into the second chain from the hook, and then I worked around, and how do I start round 2 and round 3? Does that make sense? Are there questions?
We do have a request to see how you started with the chain 2 and then put the 8 in that first stitch.
Okay. So and it's pretty easy, but sometimes when things are easy, they're actually harder to learn because you feel like you should be seeing something more than you're seeing. So there's my chain 2. So chain 1 and chain 2, and then the loop on my hook doesn't really count. So on the second chain from the hook, so there's the first chain, the second chain. I'm going to do half double, so I'm going to yarn over. And then I'm just going to go right in that chain. See, are you able to see what I'm doing? Go right into that chain, half double, yarn over, and then go into that same spot again. Does that answer the question? Does that help? Same chain. You can see that circle, it kind of gets opened up a little bit because you're putting so many stitches in it. Does that answer that question? Does that demonstrate it?
I think so. So we half doubled into the same one 3 times or 2 times. Well, in this pattern, you're going to be putting 8 stitches into the same chain.
Yeah, you'll be putting 8, but you're right. Any pattern could give you any number of instructions. So you could be putting 8, 10, 3, anything. So there's my chain, there's my opening right there. Yarn over, go in.
Follow up, not the chain, but how much into each stitch. I'm not quite sure what we're trying to ask here. You've chained 2, and then we're going to put 8 half double crochet stitches into that first chain, the second one
into the
from
first
the hook.
chain. Second chain from the hook, the first chain. Yeah. And one thing you can do is I'm going to do a chain, and then you could, you know how I love a stitch marker, Claire. Here's my slip knot. Do a chain, put a stitch marker on it, do a second chain, and then I can hold on to that stitch marker and see exactly where I'm going. And then do 8 into that one. All right, so I just want to show, I do like to have options. And so I do want to show the magic ring, which a lot of people will like the magic ring. And this pattern does not call for it, but other patterns you do might call for it, or you might want to use this pattern or this magic ring technique instead. And so this is where it's important that you tie your slip knot in a way that the tail controls how big it is. So instead of chaining 2, what I'm going to do is I am going to, so I got my slip knot, and I am going to do a chain 1, and then I am going to keep my finger in my slip knot, and I'm going to do all of my half doubles in that slip knot. And you can let it get as big as you want. It doesn't matter if it gets big. I'm not going to count them. I'm just going to do a bunch. And then I'll show you why it's magic. And there's, options of different ways you can start your projects. Okay, and because this tail controls the size, so I've got that big hole, but if you pull the tail will pull that hole closed. And that's why it's called magic ring, because that ring, just like if you know magic words, they might come in helpful, but that will pull that shut. And sometimes that's a little easier, and you can see where you're working into a little bit more easy. Okay, so there's 2 different ways of starting it. You can start by using the magic ring, or a different way is you can chain 2 and start doing your chains in the second chain from the hook. So 2 separate ways. I'm happy to take any questions and demonstrate anything that is confusing. What questions do we have?
Would you say that those 2 starting methods are pretty interchangeable?
I would say that they are definitely interchangeable. And it just really depends on which one you like better, or maybe one makes more sense to you, maybe one feels more natural. What do you think, Claire?
Yeah, I think they're probably pretty interchangeable. I'm trying to think of a situation where they wouldn't be. I know the magic circle or the magic ring or magic loop, it's called a bunch of different things. It's nice for if you're starting things like a hat at the top or an amigurumi, and you don't want to have that hole at the beginning that you might with a chain 2.
Yeah, so the magic ring, I don't like to call it magic loop because that's a knitting technique and it can be confusing, but the magic ring is ideal if you want to close that little circle up completely. And sometimes it'll say chain 4, join a ring. And then it'll have you work your into that chain 4, which will leave a nice big hole. So sometimes that hole is part of the decoration. And you'll frequently have that in a granny square situation. So, and I do like to show, not to make it more confusing, but I do like to show different ways of accomplishing the same end result, because when I first learned, I was told, certain ways were right and certain ways were wrong. And then when you see somebody else doing something differently, and then they say, well, that's not how I do it, you're doing it wrong. And if somebody ever says that to you, you can just say, oh no, but there are many ways of doing it. It just depends on which way you like best. Like, you don't have to feel like somebody's telling you you're doing it wrong. You can, have confidence to know that there are different ways of doing each technique. So you can see this way, it leaves that hole, which if you're working on a lace project or something, you might want that hole. So it just depends on what you're making, okay? Any questions? Are we ready to move on?
Someone wants to see your magic ring method again. I think it's a little different from others I've seen demonstrated. So there's a bunch of ways to do this as well.
So that the trick with the magic ring, and I've seen a lot of different ways of starting it, but the main feature of the magic ring, you have to have the tail that you're going to be able to pull later has to be what controls the size of the slip knot. That's the major reason. So if your tail, so when you get to this point, make sure your tail is what's controlling it. And I've seen people where they do all kinds of things and I don't know what they're doing. But at the end, they've tied a slip knot so that the tail is controlling the size of the loop. And that's what you need. And however you get here is fine. And then I'm going to do half double. So I am going to do a chain to get to my point where I'm going to do the half double. And so I'm going to do half doubles into my slip knot. And you can put your finger in that slip knot to kind of keep track of where it is. And you can allow that slip knot to get as big as you need it to, or as it's, you don't have to worry about keeping it pulled tight. Just go ahead and let it, do whatever it's going to do, however it's going to be comfortable in your hand. So you can see how big that, and that would be ridiculous, right? On this top of a hat. You wouldn't want a big hole like that. And then here's where you say, if I did it right, and you say your magic words, and you pull that tail, and that's closing up that slip knot. And then you can, when you sew this end in, you can, make sure it's super secure, and then that way it's not going to open up again. But that way you can let that slip knot get as big as you want, and you can work your stitches into that slip knot and have plenty of space to see what you're doing and plenty of space to get your hook in there, 10 times or whatever. And then you can pull it up. And I think this is the easiest way to do the magic ring. And, if you see other people doing it other ways, you can try whichever way you like best. So, all right, any questions? So really with crocheting in the round, starting out is, sometimes the trickiest point. Once you figure out how you're going to start, then you're ready to go from there. I showed you how to work in a spiral. So now I just want to show you quickly, because in some projects, you'll be working in what's called joined rounds. So you'll work all the way around, which I've done. I've worked all the way around. And instead of just continuing on my first stitch and doing my half doubles, what you will do in a joined round situation is you'll go into that. So I finished my stitches. I'll do one more. You finish your stitches. Oops. Finish your stitches. I've done all the half doubles that I was requested to do by the pattern. And this is my first one. So I'm just going to go into that first one and join it with a slip stitch. So now if I were just making little tiny circles for some reason, then I could be finished. You just cut it and you go on. But because it's a nice smooth finish to the circle. But if you want to continue to make it larger, so for half double, I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to do my half double. So I'll be doing 2 half double in each one to go all the way around.
And can you show where you'd place the stitch marker to mark that beginning or end of round?
So I like to mark it. I like to put it here where I mark the first stitch for the beginning, because that's where I'm joining it. Because that's where I have to join it with my slip stitch. And that way I'm sure I'm marking it, I'm joining it here, and I'm not joining it like on the chain or something. So I like to join it with my slip stitch. Let me do that again. I think I was off camera. I like to join it here with the slip stitch. So I finished my round. I have a joined round. I'm going to chain 2 for my half double crochet. And I'm going to do 2 half double crochet in the first stitch because I'm increasing. And then I'm going to take my stitch marker and mark my first half double crochet that I did. And then I'm going to go all the way around, doing 2 half double in each stitch. I'm going to try to do as fast as I can so I can show you how to finish it. Maybe I'll just do 1 in some of these stitches to get around there faster because we're not really making a project. Pretend I'm doing 2 in each one because I don't want to waste your entire evening. Two in each one as the pattern indicated. And then when you get around, all the way around, two in my last. So you've got this little opening, right? You've got this kind of little V-shaped opening. And so I'm going, there's my stitch marker. So I'm going to go in there, join it with a slip stitch. Do that again, make sure you can see. Join it with a slip stitch and then chain 2 and then do my half double. And then you might want to stick your stitch marker on there. I'm going to do another half double. And then you'll start round 3 and go all the way around. Okay, so that's joined rounds. And this here I'm going to demonstrate is in a spiral. So I'm finishing up my first round. There's my first half double there. And so all I'm going to do is just go right into that first, nothing fancy, nothing special, nothing at all. Whoops, I should have yarned over first. So, and then for the second round, I'm doubling it. So I'll do 2 in that one. And then you just continue all the way around. So there are 2 separate ways of doing it. And one is just working in a spiral, and another way is working in joined rounds. And the pattern will tell you which one you're supposed to do, or you can change the pattern and do whatever you want. But you know, these are just some different things that you're going to see when you're crocheting in the round. And I just want you to be prepared for that. And maybe when you get there, you might have to review it again or watch a video or practice, but at least it will be knowledge that you've seen and you already have it in your back pocket and you can take it out and look at it again later on. All right. I know we've covered a lot. Any questions at all? I'll be glad to review anything again.
We need a little clarification on the difference between spiral and working in the round in a spiral and working in joined rounds. So if you work in the spiral, it means that you don't slip stitch to join at the end of the round, correct?
Correct, yes. So if you work in a spiral, so right here, I finished, I'll do one more stitch, finished my first round. And then right here is my, and I think it's very important if you're working in a spiral to make sure you do have a stitch marker, because it's hard to tell sometimes where that round ends and where it begins. So make sure you do put a stitch marker either at the ending or the beginning. And here's my first stitch. I'm going to just work directly into that stitch. I'm going to do 2 half doubles without any preparation or preliminaries or preambles or anything. Just jump right into that stitch. And if I were doing joined rounds, and I finish my first round, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that first stitch, join with a slip stitch. So now my circle is complete. It's a nice finished circle. And then because I'm doing half double, I'm going to chain 2. If you were doing triple, you might chain 3 or 4, depending on what your gauge is like. If you were doing single, you would just chain 1. And now you're ready to start the second round and go. All right, so with joined rounds, you're joining the round with a slip stitch and then chaining up and moving on. With a spiral, think of it like a snail shell where you're just going round and round and round and round like a spiral. And you're not joining it. With joined rounds, however, what happens is you do, I don't know if you can see it, but you end up getting a bit of a seam. So you do end up getting a bit of a seam that you can see sometimes. It's not showing up on camera very good here, but just so you know, you do end up with a seam. And with working in a spiral, so when I finish my round, what happens is
It's the same but bigger.
I end up with this step. So like if this were the edge of a hat, you would have this step down right here. And I don't like the way that looks on the edge of a hat. So what I would do to kind of minimize that is I was working half double. So I finished my round, pretend I'm finished, pretend this is all I'm doing, and I just need to finish it. But I don't want this step down right here. So you can kind of see there's that step. And does that show up better? You can see right there how there's that step. So half double, I'm going to do a single. And then maybe I'll finish it with a slip stitch. And then you can see that minimizes that step and it gives me more of a smooth finish. So with joined rounds, you're going to get a little bit of a seam. And with a spiral, you're going to have that step where you might, if you're doing triple, you'll have a really big step, or double. But you just kind of take a step down, you go from double, half double, single to maybe a slip stitch, and kind of gives you that step down. Okay. Any questions at all?
We do have a question to see how the rounds look in double crochet as compared to half double crochet.
Oh, I don't know if we're going to have time for that because we do have other things to move on to, but I mean, that's kind of something you can practice. They don't look much different, honestly, I'll tell you. You know, single, half double and double look similar, so you know, it's not going to be a dramatic look. Okay, any questions on how to do the technique though? Are we feeling a little better about it?
You wouldn't want to switch methods halfway through a project, right? You just want to pick one and stick to it from the start.
I would say pick one and stick to it. What do you think, Claire? I mean, there could be an opportunity to change, but I'm thinking usually no.
I'd say usually, I think maybe if you were like making a hat and you wanted to start out with the spiral method and then switch to joined rounds, that might be okay.
Yeah.
But there is going to look a little bit different between those two methods. So just be aware that it's not going to look identical.
Yeah, I feel like there's always a reason to do something, but it might not come up very often when you're going to be using the same one in the same project. Okay, anything else?
What's next, since we're a little over halfway through class here?
Little jellyfish. Okay, so what we've learned so far, so this is the top piece of our jellyfish. And what we've learned so far is how to start it. So start in the center, and you can choose whether you want to use, you know, magic ring, or if you want to do it the way the pattern says. And then we're going to do our rounds. And I don't know if it shows up on camera, but I can see pretty well here that they are in spirals. So I'm not sure if you can see that or not on camera. But you can see the spirals. And so you're just going to continue working in your spirals, increasing as the pattern indicates. So the first ring, you're going to do 8, and then you're going to double that to 16. And then round 3, you're going to start out with an increase. You're going to work 1 stitch standard and then an increase. So you'll just keep increasing it to make it a certain size. And then what's going to happen is, let's see what happens. You're going to start making it smaller. And how you're going to accomplish that is you're going to half double crochet 2 together. So let me demonstrate that. How to half double crochet 2 together. So half double crochet starts off with the yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, pull it through all 3, half double crochet. Now half double crochet 2 together means we're decreasing. So we're going to take 2 stitches and turn them into 1 stitch. So we're going to decrease by 1. You start off with the yarn over, you enter the stitch, you bring up a loop, and now you have 3 loops on your hook. So we're going to stop right here for just a second. We're going to rest here for a second. Yarn over, go into the next stitch, bring up a loop. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5, yarn over, and you're going to bring it through all 5. And sometimes you kind of have to tease it through, and that is double crochet 2 together. So yarn over, go through your stitch, bring up a loop, 1, 2, 3, yarn over, go through your stitch, go through your next stitch, bring up a loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over, and sometimes you kind of have to tease it through. Sometimes you can pull it through all at the same time. Sometimes you have to take it through 1 loop at a time. And then that is taking 2 stitches and turning them into 1 stitch. So that's a 1 stitch decrease. Okay, do we want to see that again? How do we feel about that? It's pretty easy once you do it a couple of times. Although the last time I taught this, I got all confused and had it all mixed up, didn't I, Claire? So you have 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Start off with a yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop. 1, 2, 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over, go to the next stitch, bring up a loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then bring it through all. Now, sometimes, because I like to have more options, sometimes I'll do it this way. I'll start off normal, yarn over, go through my stitch, bring up a loop, 1, 2, 3, and then I will just jump right into the next stitch, bring up a loop, and then I only have 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, yarn over and pull it through both. And sometimes I feel like that is less bulky and maybe it shows up less. So that's kind of like doing a half double and then a single together. So that's an option. And then one that's less visible is you start off with the yarn over. And then instead of going normal, you just go through, instead of going through under both loops, you just go under the first leg. And then you bring up a loop, I have 3, yarn over, and then just go under the first leg, yarn over, bring up a loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yarn over, bring it through all. And again, that's supposed to be less bulky. It's supposed to be invisible, but I don't think it's invisible, it's less visible. It's gonna look different on the other side. So this is a good choice for amigurumis or for a hat or for something where you're only gonna see one side. If it's a baby blanket or a scarf where you're gonna see both sides, might not be the best choice. So any questions about any of that? I do like to give options. I like to give choices. I don't like to be told what to do. So I don't like to do things the right way or the official way. Sometimes I like to make up my own way, right? Does anyone else like to make up their own way? I do not like to be told what to do. What questions do we have? Any questions?
Just a reminder that I think we had some confusion that you weren't actually doing round 16, I think it is, with the decreases, but you're just demoing how to do that decrease.
Just demoing, yeah. So today in class, we're learning all of the techniques needed to make the octopus or jellyfish. And we're reviewing the pattern to make sure that we get to each technique, but we're not actually making it in class. So I want to show you all the techniques you need to learn, plus a few extra ones that you'll need for crochet in the round later on that might come in handy. And then as we're reviewing the pattern, yeah. So that was not the whole, that was not the proper line. It was just learning the technique. So any questions about how to do that technique? Either the right way or the wrong way? No questions?
I think we're good to move on.
All right. So, just referring back to the pattern quickly, the next thing you'll be making in the pattern is the bottom of the jellyfish. And all that is, it's super easy. It's just this circle. So we're starting off the same. You start off with, your center, however you want to do your center. And then you just work out increasing as you go out until you make it the right size. So basically it tells us to work the base the same as the top through round 7. And at the end of round 7, you're going to join with a slip stitch and just fasten off. So you're just going to be making this circle. Okay. Now, to make these tentacles, that's the next step in the pattern, to making these tentacles. And so to make the tentacles, they're very easy to make. If not a little tedious after you get the first, second, or third one done. You're going to chain 45. You're just going to chain standard 45. And 20, 30, 40, 45. There we go. Chain 45. And then chain 45, and then we're going to double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. And that means basically we're skipping 3. So again, you don't count the one on the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So in the 4th chain from the hook, we're going to double crochet 2. So yarn over, to double crochet, we bring up a loop, and pull it through 2, yarn over, pull it through 2. And we're doing 2 double crochet in each chain. So we're doubling how many we have very fast. So we're increasing very, very fast. And what that's going to do is it's going to force our piece that it will not be able to lay flat because it's increasing so fast. It will force it to kind of curl. So you can see it's already starting to curl because we're increasing way too fast. But that's going to give us just the look we want for, I would call it a jellyfish. Claire, do jellyfish have tentacles, or what are they called on a jellyfish?
Yes, they're tentacles.
Tentacles. And what are they called on an octopus? Are they legs? Or they're legs, right, on an octopus?
I think they're technically arms.
Arms, okay. Well, the pattern's calling this an octopus, but it says it has tentacles. So I'm not gonna, I don't know what to think of that. All right, so here we go. Any questions on how to make these tentacles? So you can see just by doubling, it's trying to force it into a circle. And so then when it hangs, you can kind of curl it around your finger or around a pencil or something. You only want to make it curly. Okay. Any questions? And again, you don't have, everything doesn't have to be perfect. Like what if you, instead of chaining 45, what if you chain 40? What if some of them you chain 50? What if they're all different lengths? That might be really interesting, right? So you don't have to, you can have some artistic expression or interpretation on these. This is a toy, so it's supposed to be fun, right? What other questions do we have? Anything else? Questions? I feel like we've covered a lot. So if you do have a question, don't hesitate. I'm going to take this seam out real quick so I can. How are we doing, Claire? Any questions? No questions?
Nope, no questions coming through. We're debating arms versus tentacles. Who knows?
All right,
I
yeah.
agree with Sam. They're just the things that hang down.
I think legs are an option too. Maybe they're legs. Take this out. I'll show you how to seam it all together. So once, after you've had a chance to review everything you've learned today, and maybe you make the octopus or the jellyfish, you'll be able to take all of these skills and apply them to making hats and all kinds of projects. So, feel free to, keep learning and exploring and making all kinds of wonderful things. So whenever I finish my pieces, I like to leave these really long tails, and I use that for seaming, and then you end up with less ends to weave in that way. So that's a little trick I like to use. And when I'm seaming, because knitted and crocheted fabric is stretchy, and when you lay this out, you can see it's pretty much, exactly the right size. But, sometimes when you're sewing, things get stretchy and you get to the end and you're like, why didn't that match up right? Because, you've stretched certain pieces maybe more than others. So what is a nice thing to do, and you can use clothespins or safety pins or anything, is you want to kind of pin everything together or clip everything together. So I'm going to clip these together with these clips, and that'll just help you manage your piece so that you don't end up with like really, you don't want to get half, 90% of the way finished and realize that you still have 50% of your piece to try to sew in, because that's not going to be a fun day. So you have to take it out and kind of reapproach. So this way, it kind of helps you to manage everything as you're going. Okay. So if you were crocheting, you would go into that stitch right there. So if you were still crocheting, that's where you would make your next stitch. And same over here, you can kind of see there, that's where you would kind of do your next stitch. So we're going to use those as we're seaming. So we're going to use that stitch and we're going to use that stitch. So we're going to pick up 2 strands of yarn from this side and 2 strands from that side. And then you're going to go back the same way, 2 strands of yarn, 2 strands of yarn. And you're not going to skip any stitches. You're just going to keep going. And that way, for people that don't have a lot of experience seaming, sometimes I've had students get very anxious when they're told they have to do a seam because they feel like they can't do it. But if you crochet this piece and you're familiar with, how to crochet and where to put your crochet hook, then you can certainly seam it up very nicely because you're working on that same space. So you're going right through there and on the other side. And what's going to give you a beautiful seam is the fact that your stitches are spaced out all the same space and they're going all the same depth. So like you're not randomly going down here or taking a really big stitch. You've got these stitches right here all spaced out and measured out for you. And so you're just going to use these and you will have a beautiful seam. And you're using the same yarn that you made it with. So even if it shows up, it's still going to look nice, right? It's not going to look bad. If you get over anxious and you pull it too tight, just stop every now and then. If you know you're that kind of a person, stop every now and then and kind of massage it out to make sure you're not, pulling it too tight and making it puckered. Knit and crochet fabric are very forgiving, and you can, even if you do a seam and you realize that maybe you did something wrong and you don't like it, you can take it out and reapproach and give it a second try. You're not going to ruin your fabric. All right. Any questions about seaming? And just watch for these stitches, the same stitches you would use if you were still crocheting. And then that way you'll get a nice, and another thing you have to remember is this is a jellyfish or an octopus and it's a toy. And if your seam is not 100% perfect, I think everything will be fine. And then I like to seam it from the inside. And when you turn it, right side out, maybe look at it every now and then to see how it looks, and it's going to be fine, right? And another thing, the seam is on the bottom. So even if it doesn't look nice, then, you don't have to worry about it so much. And then to attach the tentacles, all I like to do when I did those was, when I made my tentacles, I left very long tails, and just pop those onto a large-eyed blunt needle. And just kind of, I sewed this and I stuffed it. So you want to sew this and you want to leave like a little opening, sew it all the way shut, leave that opening, stuff it with some fiberfill, and then sew it shut, and then sew these on after. And all I did was just kind of just bring it through that, like there. Oh no, I've got a big tangled mess going on. But all I did basically was just tie them in place. 2 needles going. Oops. So just kind of pull it like that. And I'm not going to do it because I want to be able to take this apart to demonstrate the next time. Tie them in place, and then, and you could do this, maybe it's easier for you to do it before you sew it shut, but for me, I did it after. And then I just I cut off those ends, and then I just kind of pulled it through like this, and this clipped them off, and you kind of pushed them into the inside. So, but basically all I did was just tie those on, nothing fancy, just like a square knot or something. So any questions about finishing it or seaming it or?
Not about that, but we do have a request to go all the way back to the beginning and show how to start that spiral method again.
So how to start it from the slip knot?
Just a request to show the spiral again. So I'd say start from the beginning.
And don't overthink it, because probably easier than you think it should be. So just start with a slip knot. And the pattern says chain 2, so I'm going to chain 2, and I'm going to work 8. 1, 2, oops, 3, 4. All right, let's see if I did this right. I wasn't trying to do magic loop. I just think I did it on a, okay. So then you pull that shut. I've got my magic loop. All right. I'm going to do one more. All right, and there's my chain 2, my first chain, I'm sorry. And there is my first half double. And all I'm going to do, so the second round, so there's really nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. I finished my first round. Second round, I'm going to do 2 half double in that first stitch. So yarn over and do 2 half double in that first stitch. So you're probably thinking, I don't see what he's doing to join that or to go to the next round, when the answer is nothing. I'm doing nothing. All you do is you finish your first round and then just immediately jump right into that first stitch and continue around. You do nothing, right? Claire, is there a better way to explain that? How would you explain it?
I think that's a good way to explain it.
Yep, there's nothing to see here. You're not missing it. I'm not trying to trick you. This is not a trick.
Well, while we wait for any last minute questions to come through, I'll say if any of you are perhaps knitters or you know someone who's a knitter, we're going to be off for the next couple of weeks. But when we come back on March 28th, we're going to be doing our first premium class with Michaels. And so if you want to learn how to knit some Fair Isle, perhaps some Fair Isle worked flat, you can join us on Monday, March 28th for that. Okay, we've got a question here. Which did you say had less of a seam, a spiral or joined rounds?
Spiral has less of a seam. But if you're making a hat, you do kind of get that step down, which you can smooth out at the end. It's not a problem. If you do have questions going forward, once you get started, that's when the questions will happen. Feel free to contact me. You can contact me on Instagram, and my Instagram name is Mr. Woolly Bear. It's M-I-S-T-E-R spelled out Mr. and then Woolly Bear. Maybe Claire will put that in the chat so you can see it. Feel free to send me a direct message on Instagram. Also on Facebook, it's just my name spelled out just the way it is on the screen. So in my picture, you'll recognize my picture. So just send me a direct message either on Instagram to Mr. Woolly Bear or on Facebook to my name. And I don't get very many, and I really don't mind answering questions or helping you, with any problems you come up with, crochet related. Let's not, get too crazy about it. And then, if you do make something, I'd love to see it. So you can tag me in posts or send me a picture. It's really fun to kind of see what people come up with. So, any questions? Any final questions? Anything at all? Are we finishing early, Claire? That happened last week? I think. It's amazing, right? 2 weeks in a row.
I'm sure it will be 5 o'clock by the time we say goodbye and close this, or at least 5 o'clock here on the East Coast.
All right, then. Okay. So just don't forget to practice. Practicing is where the learning really happens. So, you can watch it, but you really are going to learn by practicing. So keep practicing, and thanks for coming to class. Have a great night.